Hello, Phil Houghton here, and this is my family history channel. In these short episodes we will look at some of my wider family and put into context some of the stories, pictures and even a bit of film that keeps their memories alive. I'm doing this project as much as anything as a resource for my children, and because I've got a bit of time on my hands, but hope other relatives who see this will find it interesting too. Where there are some of my relatives watching this, do feel free to comment and indeed correct me on any of my believed facts or interpretations that appear wrong. And anyway, it'd be great to hear from you, and if possible, we can add in some new material. So, where to start? Well, I've chosen to start with my grandfather, my mum Lillian's dad, William Alma Greenwood. This is him. He always seemed to me to be a very happy chap, almost cheeky really, even into his old age. Anyway, William Alma Greenwood was born 16th of January 1891 in London, one of 6 children, 3 brothers and 3 sisters. This is his sister Elizabeth. Born to Thomas William, an artist in mirrors, and Clara Greenwood of 43 Rising Hill Street in Clerkenwell. It's not far from King's Cross railway station. You know, that's quite a long time ago. It's worth taking a moment to think what else was going on in the 1890s. Queen Victoria was on the throne, William Gladstone was in his 80s, a Liberal Prime Minister, Thomas Edison was building the first cinema, Coca-Cola was putting its beverage in bottles, school leaving age was raised to 11, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle killed off Sherlock Holmes at Vikenhart Falls. It would be a few years after William's birth before radio was invented by Marconi, and another 3 before the start of the modern Olympic Games. So, quite a while ago. Anyway, from being baptised on the same day as his older brother, William's early life, so far as I can tell, does not seem to be documented or particularly well remembered. But I have discovered this entry in the school records and shows him at the age of 3, when he went to Laystall Street School in Camden, one set up specifically for the elementary education of poor children. What is quite surprising is that the building still exists, and perhaps even more surprising, it's still being used as a primary school. Quite a legacy there. Perhaps the defining event of his childhood was an accident he had as a young boy playing a game played almost exclusively by boys, apparently called, rather unimaginatively, hoop and stick, or otherwise known as trundling. You can see children doing it here. It wasn't a particularly sophisticated game and could be played in a number of ways, including combatively knocking over opposing teams' hoops. But for unfortunate William, at some point, perhaps playing with his elder brothers, a heavy iron hoop crashed into his leg and broke it. All this well before the NHS, but even then, voluntary medical services were provided to the poor, subsidised by charities. It looks like he was taken to St Bartholomew's Hospital. It's Britain's oldest hospital, established in 1123 by King Henry I, apparently. Anyway, it would have been relatively close to where he would have been living. Records show a William Greenwood, aged 10, in the hospital during the census of 1901. Wards looked a bit different then, as did the nurses. Now, while treated, it evidently did not go as well as it might have done, and hence his legs set at an angle, as you can see, and he subsequently always walked with a limp. He often had a stick with him, but clearly it was not always needed. It's me he's pushing around on my tricycle here in Eltham around 1966. Anyhow, the next data point we have is the census of 1911, which puts William, aged 20, still living with just his mum, and now employed as a glass grinder. His father appears to be living elsewhere in London, presumably due to work. The glass trade should come as no surprise. I can find at least 3 previous generations of Greenwoods employed in the glass business, with them being variously described as glass workers, grinders and bevelers. My mum told me of often seeing her dad's hands, and particularly the fingertips, red and sore from glass splinters. The census marks him as a cripple due to his leg injury. A politically incorrect term these days, but remember that this designation obviously made him exempt from the imminent First World War, which would go on to claim around 1.3 million people of around his age from the UK alone. That hoop quite possibly saved his life and was a small part of the chain that permitted mine, and indeed that of a lot of others who will watch this history. 1 year on, and we find his banns being read for marriage to Elizabeth, with them aged 22 and 20 respectively, and subsequently getting married at St Saviour's Church, Houghton, on Christmas Day, 1913. Must have been quite a day. I suspect it was quite possibly to roll wedding and Christmas celebrations together, to have a great day while minimising cost. The church is still standing, just having been bombed during World War II, and only now being redeveloped. This marriage would go on to last 68 years and produce some 11 children. Quite a legacy for a humble glass grinder. We'll look at what some of those children got up to in subsequent episodes. And just think about the practicalities here. It was not just an amazing legacy, but also an extraordinary effort between them. Well, probably mostly his wife Elizabeth. But when we remember that most of these children were brought up at 30 Lannoy Road, which, far from being a mansion, was essentially a small house with 4 bedrooms. That accommodated at one time the 2 parents, 8 children, plus a John Margaret Brown, who was presumably living there according to the electoral register. The house is still standing in New Eltham in South East London and is up for sale at the moment for around 1,000 times what it would have cost in 1920 when the Greenwoods were there. Though William and Elizabeth, they almost certainly rented, but the contrast is still striking. The conservatory wouldn't have been there, and it looks like there was a ground floor bedroom. The garden is a decent size, but gosh, this defines living on top of each other. This is the kitchen, feeding 12 people. It kind of makes you think. In their later years, some of their younger children were close in age to their first grandchildren. Rose had David when her brother Peter was 2 and Stan 6. It would certainly have kept them all close, I guess, being a big family. Bill and Elizabeth continued looking after their children, even after their children were married, with my mum Lillian living with them while she was pregnant, and then subsequently with little baby Tony, while my dad Stan was still in the army out in Africa. And then later, June, another one of the daughters, and her husband Peter lived with them for about 4 years before they got their own place. Bill and Liz, as they were known, were well loved by their children, who regularly met up with them and took them out for visits to the coast or to their family homes. I have vague memories of both of them, visiting their little flat at 217 Sangley Road in Catford, with Bill usually with a cigarette in his mouth and watching the horse racing on TV. He died in 1976 in hospital in Lewisham, South East London. I remember my mum saying she had had a great visit to him there only the day before he died, and he was lucid, laughing and remembering the old days. So there we go. William Alma Greenwood, my granddad. If anyone has any stories to add, to put them in comments would be welcome. To send me an email, and perhaps there will be enough for a part 2. The stories of his children, and indeed some of the stories from my father's side of the family, will follow in subsequent episodes. Hope to see you then.
See you then.